If we have time, I'd love to accomplish two different missions. One, I want to give people at least two practical examples of GTM workflows and systems that are actually tangible that they can implement it into their business.
Nice.
And second of all, I want to make it very clear how AI is being used by top GTMTs that we're working with. We work with right now 4 different YC companies. We have enterprise companies. We have a Fortune 100 logo.
GTM AI podcast with Jonathan Moss and Coach K, where you get the latest with AI and GTM today. GTM AI podcast with Jonathan
Good evening,
Moss
good
and
afternoon,
Coach
everyone.
K.
It is I, Jonathan Carford. Some call me Coach K, only because my last name's hard to say, and I sometimes coach people on random shenanigans. So there you go. There's your tidbit for the day. And I am excited, thrilled, and humbled to have my man Daniel Rosenthal join me. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing good. Thank you. Thank you, Coach K.
Yeah, man, I'm so glad to have you. We had a call before. You just got back from Dubai, you're living in Barcelona, which is really good. You are, if I can do a quick intro, you're one of the co-founders of Workflows.io. You come from the background of being a Clay Enterprise partner. You worked with the teams at Cold IQ. Back in the day, which I saw this, you're a territory sales manager. So you've been from in the trenches to actually inside the tech and the tools, kind of getting in the nitty gritty of the things, which is why I want to talk to you. So I just want to tell you, so good to have you, and just thank you for coming to hang out for a second.
For sure. I'm definitely still in the trenches, just like I used to, just a different sound of it. I think sometimes the problem that used to affect you most is the one that you most want to solve. And I think that's ultimately like the goal of Workflows, is to help GTM teams basically build the systems I wish I had when I was a full cycle rep.
Oh, much needed. Tell me this. I like to begin, as you all know, to make sure people kind of get to know you a bit more. So give me the breakdown. I gave a little bit about your professional background. Who is Daniel? Who's the human side?
Yeah, a little bit more about my background. I actually come from a science background. I have a master's in biology, and pretty much my entire
Nice.
young adult life, I wanted to actually become a scientific researcher, specifically in the neurodegenerative disease sector. But I'm never a plan B guy. I had a plan A, and I applied to one PhD. That was like everything I was planning to do after a university, a very prestigious PhD at the University of Cambridge. But I thought I was going to get it because I had already made a connection with the lab, and I was confident. I didn't in the end. I had no backup plan. But that's not to say that science always my number one calling. I was already dabbling with different businesses back then. I was super interested in crypto, not so much anymore, but I was actually...
I remember those days, not too long ago. I remember.
Yeah. So I think, I don't know, we'll see if it has another revival. I don't follow it too much anymore, but I was in a student community where I was basically doing BD for these different crypto projects, and I always had this like entrepreneurial itch. So I was like, you know what, let me combine my knowledge of biotech. Let me, pursue this interest in sales and entrepreneurship, and let me, get my first footing in the working force. And I started as a full cycle lead for a biotech company. I was selling basically genetic research materials to scientists. I was a Chinese company, very interesting. Actually did a bunch of sales there. I had 5 million in sales, but zero system. We only implemented a CRM towards the end. We had like a custom built CRM. That was terrible.
Wow.
And I basically wanted to start a RevOps department. I couldn't. That led me to, a different job opportunity, and now I'm here. So that's a little bit of my story.
Wow, that's crazy. So I'm curious, why? I know you said you wish you had had these things before. You obviously could have done a lot of things. Like you said, do your own workflows. Tell me what you guys do that's different from whoever else is in the marketplace. Like what makes workflows unique?
Yeah, great question. I think there's a lot of, you're very familiar with them, these clay agencies who are very good at spinning up a bunch of mailboxes, mapping out a TAM, and just spamming the market with AI personalized messaging. When I first started doing all this stuff, I was a really early Clay user. I started using it nearly 3 years ago. It worked so well back then doing this stuff, just basically automating messaging with a little bit of personalization in a touch. Used to print like crazy. I've also watched this whole industry get a lot harder. But I think, when you look at really successful GTM teams, they're not completely trying to take the human out of the loop. I know with your experience, you believe in the same thing, but I guess our sweet spot is we're still doing the automated messaging stuff. That's only really a fraction of what we do. We're really trying to implement AI in a way that enhances human output. So really getting into the RevOps side of things and really building AI that hands over and takes from, the stuff that humans are doing. And I think that's ultimately working the best. The teams that we're working with, I'm watching firsthand how if you increase your rep efficiency and you have really talented reps and you equip them the right systems, it's going to work way better than any AI SDR fully automated solutions.
Yes.
That's really our wedge in the market right now. And we build things in a way that our clients can own them and keep using them, which isn't good for maybe our retention, but because there's a lot of value there, we're doing pretty decent.
I know you guys obviously work with a lot of tech, like you have a lot of different workflows to your name of your company that kind of features different things. How do you keep up with everything? Because like I consider myself pretty advanced with keeping up with stuff, and I can keep up with everything. So I'm just curious, like how in the world, how do you do that?
Yeah, not just me. Everything is a team game. So for myself, I'm basically I live and breathe this all day. That passion I used to funnel into science and I funnel into GTM and tech. So part of it is just absolutely loving what I do. But the second part is our team is basically a bunch of, me's and different versions of these, boys and girls, obviously, but young, hungry, ambitious, smart people. So I also get lots of tidbits from the team. Everyone's keeping up to date. And I think the culture we built is ultimately what's also keeping me up to date because my team is telling me stuff all the time. And I had one team member build a custom LLM that reduced our credit, basically our AI spend for one of our clients by 90%. Like I would have never done that, but I have a great team.
That's cool. I love it. Tell me this, like if someone's going to listen to this entire podcast, what's in it for them? What are they going to get out of listening to your wisdom today?
If we have time, I'd love to accomplish two different missions. One, I want to give people at least two practical examples of GTM workflows and systems that are actually tangible that they can implement it into their business.
Nice.
And second of all, I want to make it very clear how AI is being used by top GTMTs that we're working with. We work with right now 4 different YC companies. We have, enterprise companies. We have the Fortune 100 logo. So I see different ends of the spectrum there. And I think people's conception of how AI is used in GTM is often far from exactly how I think people should use it. And I'm sure you, with your background, like you have as much, if not more, to give there as I do. So I'd love to also make this a combo between us two.
All right, I'm just gonna ask questions because I'm just these conversations, I'm a sponge. I'm like, just soak it up. Let's give it all.
All right, let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it, man. Let's get into it. So what's the first version? What are you gonna go over first?
I think, and I am gonna ask you a question here, but I think one thing I'm sharing for marketers all the time is that I think like you're seeing one side of the market usually working for these hyper growth AI startups, and they simply can't keep up with the demand. They're not having any demand gen problems, anything like that. But I do think a vast majority of the market, maybe the ones you hear about less, are struggling a lot right now. I think AI has basically increased the activity across all channels. People are testing more ads, copying more ads from their competitors. On the content side of things, people are posting a ton, also reducing the quality of it. And on outbound, we already talked about it. People are spinning up hundreds of inboxes, sending thousands of emails per day. And every marketing channel is congested. I think a lot of people are coming to us and similar businesses and being like, how can I make it work? And there's a central piece that I think is ultimately how I think GTM should be done in 2020. And honestly, like going forward, we call it the GTM Flywheel because I think every single channel, if you want to go to market effectively, needs to ultimately feed into the other channel. I think like you can't afford inefficiency in your GTM nowadays. Like a very simple example is you have teams running LinkedIn ads. LinkedIn is the one platform that you can actually choose the companies who are going to see your ads, ABM ads. But you've got teams wasting ad budget on accounts that one, aren't all ICP fit, two, are not the same accounts that sales are prospecting, and three, they're not actually, for example, scraping that engagement and feeding it to sales. So you have all these teams that are basically doing silo GTM experiments and strategies instead of actually like maximizing what you can do with what you have and feeding all the channels together. And I think for years, people have talked about sales and marketing combining, and they've basically built different departments to solve for this. Earlier, I think you had like growth hacking, very like holistic growth people. Then like you started to have just these growth teams. Then you had like RevOps, which I love RevOps people. I think it definitely has its value. And then you have GTM, but all this is like a department to solve a strategic problem that I think is ultimately a choice in how you build your GTM strategy of like aligning all your resources to one goal.
Yes.
Jonathan, am I cool to share my screen?
Please do.
Okay. 1 second.
Part of this is interesting because I feel like it's a conversation not only about there's all these tactics you can do as well, but I do think there is like some marketing principles around demand generation that people don't do as much. They think they can turn on an AI and all of a sudden their demand generation woes are solved for them. Like, that's not how this works. It's like you have to have a larger cohesive strategy that, like you said, is working together, not just one piece at a time,
Exactly. Like, you could say, I want to use AI to write my ads, and sure, that's like a pretty decent use case. But I say a much better use case is, let's scrape all the engagement from our ads. Let's score who's an ICP fit, and let's send a signal to the team that has all the account research that gives them everything they need. I think that's a much better use of AI than, let's say, just writing ad copy, which we all know is still not very good. It's the best ad copywriters out there.
Yep, I agree.
So my question for you before I get started is, with your massive growth that you saw with Momentum, did you hear similar things amongst your clients that people are essentially feeling like AI is raising to the bar? And, if you're above that bar and you're using all the tools, it's great. But if you're below that bar, like, people are struggling?
You mean with internal teams, you mean?
With teams that you're working with, you speak to lots of startups or enterprises. Is that generally what
Yeah,
you're
across the board, people we hear this just as much in the enterprise motion. We're talking to people who have 20,000 employees all the way down to 20. It's the same thing. I think there's a lot of perceived pressure and also perception that everyone else is ahead and they should be adapting to AI, and they're not. So I think it's more the perception what's happening versus what's actually happening. Because I can tell you from selling AI and adopting AI instead of different technology companies that are massive, and even we're talking like our customers like 11 Labs and Cursor and some other people who are very obviously AI forward. I know what's going on in the background, and not everything is as peachy keen as you think it is. You know what I mean? Like, they're doing some really cool, wicked stuff. I should say wicked cool stuff, but it's also like some of the basic fundamentals around, like, what does your ICP care about, and what's the problems going on in the marketplace, and how do you actually bring value? It's like the things that AI is not necessarily going to solve or help you solve it better, but it's not going to magically solve all your problems. It's the same fundamental problems we have to fix before,
Yeah, and honestly, I think there's a lot of like old school sellers and marketers who have these great fundamentals, but they are not as good at the system design and systems thinking. So one thing I'd like to say is, you give an old school seller, an old school marketer, new school systems, and oftentimes they have the fundamentals in check, and I think that's where oftentimes magic can happen.
I agree.
Just sharing my screen here. I think, look, some of the tools you're seeing here, these are tools that we use, but this is actually a strategy that.
Hang on one second. Sorry. I'm looking at a Spotify playlist.
Oh my goodness.
Don't worry. I can
edit that out.
I don't know that. Don't worry. I was like, what tools are you talking about?
Oh, wait, that works. Sorry, I don't use Zoom. I use Google Meet.
Yeah.
Is it good? You see us, right?
Yes, I see that off. Hang on.
I have my rap playlist and everything. Great.
It's all right, man. I like rap.
Cool. This is what we call like the GTM Flywheel Playbook. Your initial reaction might be, this is not a flywheel. I think the explanation is where that comes into play. But this is really me mapping out, like, if I were to design a GTM strategy and I had unlimited resources, like, what are all the levers that could potentially pull, and how do they
I like this exercise. Are you looking at the right side or your website? Which one are you looking at?
I'm looking at the right side.
Can you zoom in a little bit so we can see? Because it's a little small. Hope you don't mind.
Right. Let me pull up in Figma, the original, if that's
sure.
better for the viewer.
Totally fine.
That would be cool to do it through our website, but honestly, yeah, half the screen cut off, so give me a second.
I get it, man. I get it. I understand.
You got the editor, right?
That's what I got editing, man. Don't worry, I edit myself more than I edit you, so don't worry about it. And don't stress, we got lots of
I'm
time.
struggling to find the original Figma, so I'm just going to zoom in if that's cool.
Yeah, zoom. It's fine. Totally funny about it. Is this on your website? What is this thing? Is this just your website?
Yeah, this is workflows.io/workflows/GTM Flywheel Playbook.
Just zoom in on. It'll be fine. Yeah, perfect. That's great.
All right, cool.
Yep.
So this is mapping out, in my opinion, pretty much every relevant channel. There's some, like, viral marketing and word of mouth, kind of like Cursor and stuff. But like generally speaking, this is pretty much it. So I think every GTM strategy starts with traffic generation. I think what's important here is that you nail not even just like content ads outbound, one of the sub channels before you move on to any others. I think in general, people used to say like have 1-2 channels and stick with it. But I think that advice is getting a little bit dated because the B2B buying journey is becoming even more complex. I think if you can, especially if you're VC funded, like you should be everywhere as you can. So definitely nail one channel before you move on. But I also think like try and nail as many as you can, to be honest. I think as long as your team has the capacity for it. So I think for content, you have like podcasts, you have Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube, X, TikTok, Facebook, and then you have like SEO and AI SEO. Some of them better for B2B, some of them better for B2C. But generally, I think when we're speaking about B2B, LinkedIn SEO tends to be some of the bigger ones. Podcast, this one. Then in terms of ads, you have Google ads, Meta ads, LinkedIn ads. Then you also have directories, event sponsorships, like your event that's still an ad, or billboards and TV. I think LinkedIn ads is pretty hard to nail, but still highly underrated. I think depending on how B2C you're selling, Meta ads can give you really low cost per leads. Google ads is demand capture. I think every brand should be doing it. I think there's things like Reddit ads that are up and coming.
Hey, Reddit's a killer channel for ads, man. It does great.
There are agencies who their entire service is basically around finding relevant conversations that you could plug your product in and just like posting organic content as if they're just a Redditor and like your tool into those conversations. Like there's different ways to play the Reddit game, but yeah, Reddit ads is a decent one from the one I've seen from a few companies we work with.
For sure. Yep.
Then you have outbound. You have cold email and cold LinkedIn DMs, cold calling. You also have warm outbound, which I think is a completely different subset. I think you should have treated differently. And then you also have a conference-based outbound, in-person outbound. There's also like field marketing, whatever you want to call it. Then in terms of partnerships, I think you got agency programs, companies like Clay. I've shown that's a very good channel. You've got integration partners, white label partners, referrals, influencer marketing.
Oop. So sorry. That was my fault. Share again. I was meant to annotate. Keep going. Sure. My apologies. We're having all sorts of issues. Don't worry. I can edit all this through. Yes. Can you back it up just a hair? All right. And all I can, there we go. So that is great. Yep. Good.
Cool.
And then we're out here.
Influencer marketing, which I think is one of the most effective channels going to 2026, depending on how you implement it. You also got press features, a little bit more brand awareness. Then you got platforms like Product Hunt that help you market your software, and then you've got affiliate programs. So there's a lot of choice for how you generate traffic. And ultimately, I think a good GTM team or founder will ultimately know like where they think are the lowest hanging fruits, where they should focus first. But I do think it's worth already planning ahead in your GTM strategy. Like, okay, for example, starting with LinkedIn, we already started with LinkedIn, but we already knew that we were going to, once we had the budget, start going into LinkedIn ads, start really, eating our own dog food with outbound. And so I think generally mapping out all these channels has some merit. But okay, you've generated all this traffic. Very seldomly in B2B does traffic just go from traffic to sales call booked. So you want to cure leads in as many different ways as possible. I think this is where a lot of great companies still miss. Like anyone following you on socials, anyone engaging with you on socials, anyone downloading your lead magnets, anyone filling in, obviously, landing page forms. I think that one is the most used.
But
it's gold for your team. Like your sales team should be like outbounding these people before anyone else. But I do think this is where AI becomes extremely relevant. I think like the core AI, the best AI use case, in my opinion, is a web research agent that looks at a company's website and decides if they're qualified and they can be enriched further to potentially be lead score. I think that is like the core AI use case that we use across pretty much every single workflow. Obviously, there's like so many more on top of that, but I think maybe this wasn't used as much before, because if you just gave your sales team in the pre-AI era a bunch of like LinkedIn engagement, like 90% of it would be junk. But now that you can easily sort through that 90% and give them the 10% that's not junk, now all of a sudden these channels start becoming way more important. So I think like the old playbook of, for example, posting content but not doing all this stuff doesn't work as well. But once you connect all these channels, start feeding your sales team the right signals, I think that's where you start to achieve some better outcomes. So nurture all these leads that you're capturing. Your SDRs can, have manual touch points. You can run retargeting ads. Content is one of the best nurture mechanisms and it isn't spoken about enough. All of my LinkedIn connections are at least at some point seeing my LinkedIn content periodically. So you should be connecting all of your inbound leads, all of your signups as much as you can, at least the qualified ones, because they will see your content. And that is another touch point. There's a famous stat, 16 touch points required on average of B2B to all that. Every content piece that they see is one more touch point. Newsletter is another touch point. It's so important to own your audience. So to bring it from social platforms, from ads, and to own your email list. Community. This one is so hard to nail, but can be so powerful once you nail it. I think it works for some companies better than others, depending on what your product area is, but that one's a huge one. Webinars, dinner invites, a lot of enterprise sales teams are seeing some success there. In-person events, you can still nurture someone there. Email flows and gifts. Now, I think what's really important is even if you have all this in place, I think, website is still super important. If that part fails, then you might just waste all the effort above. So we believe a good website has a video demo, testimonials, case studies, product marketing, resources, and ideally free tools. That's a great way to get people coming back to your website. That should all, if you do it correctly, lead to free trials and meetings booked. And that sales process then begin. That could be a whole other graphic. Obviously, I'm simplifying here, but in my opinion, I like to say you should be running your best performing content should become your ads. You should be running ads to the same list that your team is outbounding, and you should be outbounding all the people engaging on your content. And that's why I think this is still a flywheel, even though it's not a circular diagram.
Do you not think that using I don't know what a technology like OneMind is like, onemind.com? Do you use anything like that to help capture and then convert to a meeting when they visit the website?
OneMind is I already searched up. Someone told me about this, and I think you told me about this.
Yeah.
I told you about this last time we spoke.
Yeah.
So this is like an AI, like an inbound SDR that speaks to people, right?
It's it can do technically the entire process. So it's very technical. Like the people use for HubSpot, for example, it takes them through all the way through the sign up process and gets them to upsell. It's not just a show you stuff. It can bring up slides and go through technological demos. It's really advanced. But the point is though, whether it's this or something else, do you see this as another mechanism in the flow and when you get to the website, help convert and move through?
For sure. Different buyers are going to want different experiences. So
of course,
something like this, I wouldn't overhaul your standard experience, but there's going to be some buyers who like something like this, especially if you're an AI company and shows off your AI skills if you manage to do something like this. So I think there's value. Another good implementation I've seen of something like this is this company Holded. It's a really big company in Spain. I'm not sure if they still have it, but this experiment, I know their RevOps leader, worked super well for them. They basically have a phone number right here. You basically can call this phone number and you call it, and there's basically an AI SDR that is super well trained on the product that talks you through. So I do think there's going to be some more interesting people do on websites to help convert inbound. But ultimately, we talked about the fundamentals. This graph is laying out the fundamentals. You can of course do crazy stuff. What we like doing is RB2B, warmly, vector. We're a bit too about capturing that de-anonymized website visits and using that as a signal and feeding your GTM model.
Yeah, we use Vector with Momentum. We've loved that thing. It's been great. Kind of cool. This is great. Tell me this. Someone watching this would probably think to themselves, that's a whole lot of tech and it seems freaking overwhelming. Where do I even begin? What would you say?
To be honest, like I said, this is really less about the tech and more about the actual strategy. I think with some of these all-in-one tools, there's different ways that you can go about it. You can go for a platform that has a bunch of prepackaged solutions, like a Momentum, but also if you're doing ABM, we like Seam. A lot of people have started using, platforms like Unify for signal-based outbound. I'd say to be honest, that captures a lot of us. Our use cases is Clay. I think, a Clay subscription can get you a lot of the functionality. You can capture signals in Clay. You can enrich your entire CRM. You can do some of these workflows. So I think Clay is a great place to start, but a little bit of a high barrier to entry. I do think some of these packages, like I mentioned before, basically take some of that Clay functionality that you have to custom build and give it to you pre-built with less customization. So I do think there's an element to where you should decide I think it's an important decision to decide between, are you going to buy a prepackaged solution or are you going to build it yourself? Because if you have a super technical GTM team, like it's crazy how technical some of these GTM people are, especially working in AI companies. Like they're hardly sellers. They're just like extremely growth oriented, technical people. Like someone like that, you might want to give them a clay or an N8N and just be like, go build the system custom builds. But if you have like a bigger sales team, if you're more an enterprise, like you should consider some of the pre-built solutions out there that might like lower that gap of implementation and actually give you more value. So I'd say if you have the time and effort and like the custom platforms, but yeah. And besides that, like most of these tools are tools that you already have, like not necessarily expensive ones. I think like fundamentals are having a great CRM, having some way to funnel great data into that CRM, like a Clay or an N8N. And then, you want to capture the signal from your most important channels. Like if you're running LinkedIn ads, I highly recommend this really cheap tool called Fiddler. If you're on HubSpot or Salesforce, it will tell you exactly how many times an account has engaged, clicked, or seen any one of your ads, and it just updates.
Nice.
Super useful, super cheap. So there's some quick wins here, but yeah, that's where I'd probably start.
Curious, like when you see things like OpenClaw and all of these other advanced things, even things like Claude Cowork and Claude Code, do you see a world where someone will be able to come into Claude Code and be like, okay, hook up these two data sources and build this for me, and voila, you have this same thing via vibe coding?
So we're heavy into Claude Code. I still need to look more into OpenClaw, to be honest. But like my hands are full of Claude Codes. Like
I'm sure you have a good idea because if you're in Claude Code, you could replicate what doing OpenClaw pretty easily.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think like you build the system and you can run with it in OpenClaw. So
yeah,
I think it's unrealistic to expect enterprises to set up Claude Code to handle all that security. They're not really going to use MCP because what security risk there. So I think a lot of the hype you're seeing it amongst like smaller teams that are nimble enough to implement them. I think the hype is actually honestly real. I'm mind blown by Claude Code, but we use it to help deliver the service, but it is not a deliverable. Like I can't, with the types of companies we're working with, it's like my Claude Code output isn't a deliverable, but a repeatable Clay or N8N or whatever workflow is an actual deliverable. So I think like from our perspective, the fact that we find it difficult to, let's say, deliver a service on Claude Code end to end also means that, bigger teams are going to have trouble, let's say, basing all their operations there. But I think the hype is absolutely justified, to be honest. I'm completely mind blown. It's just, I don't think it's realistic. Like Claude needs to solve multiplayer for us to even be having this conversation. They also need to look durability and some of these other issues before like we're really talking about Claude Code in terms of like big GTM initiatives.
Yeah, I 3000% agree with you. I just like to ask this question because that's what most people think. They think, oh, let's go Claude Code this thing. I'm like, yeah, good luck. Have fun with that one. Because like there's so many layers to this that requires not just governance and security, but just team access and accessibility in general and all the other shenanigans that goes into a platform like Salesforce, which is why when people diss on Salesforce HubSpot, I'm like, they may not be the AI layer of everything you might be doing, but they're absolutely not going anywhere. Like there's so much infrastructure there that number one, rip it out is really freaking hard. Number two, it's just such a strong platform and has so much places you can build off of. It just makes more sense to keep it versus getting rid of it, So it's kind of
but I do think Anthropic is clearly showing that they're building the most useful tools. One thing I am sure about is that I think when it comes to businesses, I think Anthropic is going to be the winner over OpenAI.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So you had, I think, one more, you said? Want to have one more thing you want to show?
Yes. If we had time, I'd love to show. That GTM Flywheel Playbook, you might be looking at that and you might be thinking, there are lots of great businesses out there, some of them that we work with that have a small TAM. And so it's like, you do play a bit of a different game when you have a super small TAM, or if you're a company that maybe sells to, let's say, a bigger TAM, but you really only care about enterprise. It's like running all these ads and stuff. You can't look at it in the same lens that I just showed. So I do believe that ABM is back. I think companies like 6 cents in demand base, people maybe thought that ABM got a little bit of a bad rep because they were paying for these expensive contracts that were essentially a little bit like siloed dashboards. And I think 6 cents in demand base, like have great proprietary data, but I ultimately don't think they're built for the AI age. And I think account-based marketing in some of the communities, spheres that I'm in, is making a comeback because we are very good at mapping out total addressable markets. And oftentimes we're able to find, let's say, more okay fit companies than people expect when they first start working with us. But then when we truly qualify for their ICP, when we model their ICP, oftentimes there are less companies in attend than they think. So it's like, there are many great businesses that have 5,000 target accounts. Like, how does your strategy change? Because I don't think the flywheel that I presented before is necessarily exactly what you should do. So we have another playbook, and this is the ABM Playbook. And I think, you can call it ABM, you can call it account-based GTN. Kyle Poirier, who I respect a lot, is calling it ABX, but it's essentially an account-first approach when you want to delegate more resources to a smaller audience. Like, what do you do there?
Yeah.
So, does it sound like a good topic? Should I dive into this?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it, please.
I think if you have less than 10,000 target accounts, you definitely should be thinking ABM manner. Even if you have a huge TAM, if there's a small amount of that TAM that you think you can provide outsized value for, and you want your sales team to focus on, you can still consider a lot of these concepts. So I believe any good ABM strategy comes with a super rock solid ICP model. So that starts with analyzing your closed won, so like your high spend customers, but also interviewing your sales reps, even CSMs, about what they're experiencing on the front lines, looking for closed commonalities among closed loss, and also really looking at your evangelists, your highest NPS customers, and what do they all look like. I like actually exporting all your closed ones from your CRM. Maybe you remove some outliers, and then you can enrich it in Cloud Code or Clay, and you can layer on additional data points on top. And then I would feed that into another AI model. You can keep all this in Cloud Code if you want, and really start to analyze the trends. Because I think more teams than you would imagine. I was working with, I shouldn't say the name, but I was working with a unicorn that everyone knows the GTM tech space that you would think is very clear on their ICP. And that was one of their biggest issues. No one could agree on it. They had too many different segments. And so I think a lot of value can be accrued just by really understanding your ICP. So what I consider an ICP model is, in my opinion, the way it should be done is an initial qualification of like who can be considered as ICP, and then some sort of like tiering. And then I really believe you should backtest that against your CRM. And what you should see, this is what I've seen, you should see basically, let's say 10% of your total addressable market are tier ones. You should see a significantly higher proportion of those amongst your closed ones. So basically like 10% of your TAM is tier one, but then maybe 30% of your closed one to tier one. That's how you know you have a good ICP model, because it's representing the differential. So we really try and build the ICP models that represent that difference there. And, basically you want to look at photographics, technographics, and account fit signals. Specifically, account fit signals, I think signals that are time-based shouldn't be incorporated into your ICP model, because if your ICP model becomes invalid after 6 months, if you grade a company tier one because they have some open job and that company no longer has that open job in 2 months, like, I don't think that's a great model. So it should be data points that don't change at least over the course of 6 months or a year. Sorry, won't change significantly. So I think like obviously headcount should be factored in, but something like a huge headcount burst in a 3-month window, I don't think makes sense to include in your actual tiering. Then I think it makes sense to do a really broad TAM map, because I don't think modern databases, even the AI first ones, if you do a limited search, you are missing out so much. That's like a lot of our business is building really good total addressable market maps. So what we do is do a very wide pool for many different tools, consolidate them in a data orchestration tool like Play, and then filter down. Because I think, for example, if you use software development tag on Apollo, the industry tag, that is like only a fraction of the software companies on Apollo. If you use software, the keyword, you're going to find way more, but there's going to be a ton of junk there. If you want to truly map out your TAM, you have 5,000 target accounts, so you kind of have to pull all that junk and find the gold amongst them. So I believe in using like traditional databases. There's lots of, the incumbents are actually still good, but there's lots of new challengers that could be a little bit more price effective. And I also believe in scraping. There's lots of amazing SaaS businesses that sell to traditional businesses, and databases like LinkedIn or Apollo might not support that. So I like scraping industry directories, review sites, even like Chamber of Commerce. There's lots of different sources you can use to scrape data that you wouldn't be having in these other databases. And Prof Tech, that's a huge one. You really need to be scraping like tons of different lead sources. So I think that's all very important. Then you want to basically enrich and qualify.
Let me pause real quick. Why go through all those when you have clay? Wouldn't you want to just go directly to clay? Tell me you're thinking about. Not that I disagree with you. I'm just totally curious. I'm sure someone's asking. Why go through those before clay?
Clay's strong suit is their data marketplace, which, for example, Ocean.io you could use through Clay and their orchestration tools. But Clay does have their own data set, so you can build company and contact lists on Clay. But it is, to be honest, like I would say if you do a similar search on Apollo versus Clay, on the company side of things, you might find 80-90% of the coverage on Clay. And on the people side, a lot less. So I wouldn't say that Clay's actual prospecting database is the best, but I think you can take all this data from other prospecting databases and clean it up really well in Clay. But I think if you wanted to build a full total addressable market map, I would be reluctant to rely on just Clay. We do always supplement our list with Clay because it's actually their new pricing changes, but it's actually free to build like company and contact lists on Clay. It's not a thing.
Yeah. Good. Thank you for that. Appreciate it.
From there, I think you should be doing account scoring. Some people call it tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. Some people call it ABC. I, as a scientist, originally was very interested in these very complicated scoring models where you assign points. And I just realized after a lot of trial and error that these point systems oftentimes just add complexity, make it confusing for sales, and often like don't reflect reality. Like I believe in now tiering that are concentric circles. And I think, your tier ones should have a very distinct hallmark that when your team sees tier one, they get excited because they know it's exactly, in our case, it would be a Series B company, growing GTM team in the AI space. I want my team when they see tier one to know that it's that type of company. So that's how and I think this is like, I argue with RevOps people a lot on this, but this is just my opinion.
No, it's okay. Let me ask you this question. If you did it that way, like, what have you seen the results been the difference of when you do it that way versus the old point system? Like, I'm guessing that you do this for a reason and the results you're getting are better than you would have had because you're not just doing this just for kicks and giggles, right? So what's been some of the business impact?
It's just like unobscure. Like, for example, let's talk about like locations, like a Eastern European country. Like how many negative points are you going to put to that if you mainly sell to like Western European countries versus if you just say to be a tier 2, you have to be in these countries, right? So you have to do all this weird math that I don't think is suitable. I'm all about, I come from a science background. I'm all about, adding complexity where it makes sense. I just don't think it makes sense to add it in your scoring.
Got it. Keep going, man. This is great.
So once you have that enriched target account list, one thing I mentioned earlier is like, okay, you're selling to 5,000 companies. You can now ensure that you only spend ads on those companies and even more so on relevant stakeholders at those companies. You can use like the HubSpot, LinkedIn sync, or you could just upload lists directly to the LinkedIn ads platform. There's ad tech platforms that help with this, but this is a huge unlock for B2B. If you are looking like directly at your cost per lead, if you just do ads on LinkedIn, you are going to not be too happy, especially if you're coming from Meta. But if you view this in the holistic GTM strategy that I'm going to lay out, it makes so much sense, especially if you're reaching out to a small TAM. All these target accounts, you essentially want to be mapping out all of the stakeholders and all the entire buying committee. So end users for an ADM strategy could make sense, but generally speaking, we like mapping out decision makers, champions, and influencers. Influencers being like a senior person in the team and who isn't the direct championer.
Right.
With all that, now you have accounts, contacts, and all this research. It's so essential to upload that into your CRM. And what you achieve with that is like, especially if you have a small town, why is your team wasting any time building lists, especially when building lists for your small town is so difficult? You can make your CRM the best prospecting database with custom research points that are specific to how you sell and what matters for you. And you can have every single company and contact pre-uploaded to your CRM. So when you're ref on a prospect, they're just using filters on the CRM. They're not having to log into Zoom info or whatever it might be. So I think this is a super essential part. So now you have all of this. How do you make sure that your reps are always focusing on the right account, the account that are showing intent, the account that already know you, and the most fruitful opportunities? So that comes from signals. I believe there's a huge part of the community that basically said signals are overhyped, blah, blah, blah. I don't think those people are using them right at all, because signals are an absolute game changer when you action them correctly. I will die on this hill any day of the week, and I am correct.
I love it.
So I think there are three different categories of signals. You have first-party signals, data that you own solely. Second-party signals, and this is a little bit up the air, but this is essentially data exclusively sold to you. Because ad engagements are sold to you exclusively from LinkedIn ads, I call them second-party, but some people call them first-party. And third-party is in the public domain, external data. There's a lot you can, if you look at the screen share here, there's a lot that you can look into here, but I'd say the most important ones are gated content. I think a lot of marketers creating these ebooks or whatever it might be, and they're not feeding the sales team the signal right when someone downloads a piece of content. So I think gated content is one that I think a lot of people don't use enough. Product usage, obviously people are using this one, but I think there is so much PLG stuff that you can do in GTM. Product usage is a big one. Website visits, I mentioned that before. These tools will give you, a bunch of false positives and junk, but if you filter that out, it's absolute gold. So this is again what I mean with AI filtering out the noise. I think what you're left with is great signal that you previously wouldn't have access to. In terms of second party, I think ad engagement is a big one, and LinkedIn engagement is a big one. Champion tracking. If you have a big enough customer base, there's almost no reason why you shouldn't be running this play. And I think warm intros can be good, especially at the early stage. And then third-party signal tracking, technographic is huge. I think in general, especially if like you're integrating into tech, that really changes your lens of how you're reaching out, better, et cetera. Their social activity, news. A lot of people say bad things about this one, but I think if you catch the right news event, it could be a really relevant opener. There's a lot of custom third-party signals that are dependent on your business. So I can name like some really random examples, but generally speaking, these are the ones that could apply to any business. So all these skills, I think you should log into your CRM in a way that you can see it on a timeline view. So if you're using HubSpot, I highly recommend custom events. It's a feature of HubSpot that I don't see people using very often, but it allows you to add, basically an external signal into your activity timeline. You can see it along with the other activity. You can only use custom from Salesforce, CRM tasks, or tasks in your sales engagement platform, and Slack notifications. If you filter out all the noise, do all the research for your reps, and give them the signal in this format, it really makes a giant difference. You also want to pre-route these leads. So if there's a signal being shown from an enterprise company, you should only feed that signal to your enterprise sales team. And this is why a tool like Clay or some sort of orchestration tool is needed to really action these effectively. And then I also believe in awareness scoring. I think life cycle stages will always have their purpose core to your RevOps setup, but I think oftentimes they don't capture what is before an MQL. Oftentimes companies aren't creating a record or even updating the life cycle stage. If someone is, for example, engaging on a piece of LinkedIn content, I think you should be capturing that. Also, a salesperson doesn't look at MQL and really understand the awareness that means, unless they're like, you're very clear on your MQL definitions, your sales team knows that, but I believe an awareness scoring system on top of your life cycle stages makes a big difference. So we like grading accounts from identified, aware to interested, considering to selecting. We implemented this system for basically a specialized CRM for a specific industry. It's one of our clients. And the first day we implemented the awareness scores, their reps just started their day prospecting into aware. They had like 6-figure ACVs, so a deal for them is a lot. They book like usually about a deal a week. Each rep books about a deal a week. We had 3 reps book 2 meetings in one day just by prospecting aware accounts that, because they're CRM, that they didn't know that they were aware. So I think this is huge when you're reaching out to a small TAM. If you're if you're firing to a bunch of different audiences, like, maybe making the most out of every single bit of awareness doesn't matter as much, but for ABM it does. And then basically the mix of account tier and how aware they are of your company essentially determines your demand gen strategy. So for your most important or highest 10 accounts, I believe in one-to-one demand gen. So personalized factors, heads, event invites, manual outreach, and warm intros, and then one-to-many for all the rest. Parallel dialing is still working pretty good. Automated emails, social content, on-site content, video outreach, connection requests, and DMs, retargeting ads, webinars, etc. There's probably even more that I'm forgetting there from the previous graphic. And then all activity you want to push back to the CRM, and that's what I believe creates the GTM Flywheel, but specifically for ABM type strategies. And I think the final output of this is essentially the infrastructure to do ABM correctly. You want your accounts mapped, your companies tiered and scored, all the stakeholders mapped. You want to be tracking signals on all those accounts, and you want to be scoring that awareness, and that gives you productization. So I really believe, a lot of the work still starts at the demand generation stage, but this is the infrastructure I think any company needs who is reaching out to a very limited account-based first approach.
So when someone watches this, they see this kind of stuff, like, again, to what we talked about before, they think, hey, I can just get this one AI tool. It's going to solve my pipeline woes. You're going through a fairly, I wouldn't say complex, because I don't think it's complex, but it is substantial flow of these different workflows, because it takes time to build this infrastructure. Like, do you see a difference between those people who take the time to build this? Because this probably takes a little bit to set up correctly. And once they do, they see the impact. What do you see the differences between people who take the time to do the right infrastructure, like you just said, versus just throwing a tool out and hoping it's going to be the answer to their pipeline woes?
I actually, like, if you're a VC-backed startup, you can't spend time building infrastructure, especially at the early stages. Like, you've got to grow at all costs. So I'd say the teams that never build the infrastructure create absolute messes. You have a client and their sales leader used to work at massive companies. I probably don't want to say it, but massive companies you'd think have perfect RevOps, and it was an absolute mess because they started as VC-backed startups. They should be quick, and then they never built the proper infrastructure. I believe like the best approach, depending on your growth goals, is to have like one strategy, which is like our quick and dirty, get the initial leads through the door, get the initial strategy in. And I believe in tandem, you really want to be planning the long game and building this infrastructure, et cetera. But I don't think you should do one or the other. You shouldn't wait around and build infrastructure and not go to market. And you shouldn't just go to a market and not think of the long game. So I do think there's a balance there that I think companies should try and aim for.
Yeah, what I see consistently in the marketplace is that the people who take the time to kind of dissect through whatever processes, like all the things you just showed me, whether it's BDR, sales, like whatever, the people actually really take the time to look at what's the process, where's the friction points, where do we want humans, where do we not want humans, and how do we AIify the crap out of it so that the humans are really focusing on what they're good at and the AI can do everything else. It takes time. Like I would say sometimes I've seen anywhere from 2 to 6 months. And for those 2 to 6 months, it's brutal because all these LinkedIn updates on open client, like, oh, I'm behind. But if you take that time to do it, you like skyrocket so fast once it's set up. And then I think it's a way for you to be set up for the future so that when the next iteration of whatever happens in AI, you're already ready for it versus the people who do not do this and kind of get by with 1 or 2 tools here and there and become chaos. Like they're going to get so far behind, it's going to be hard to catch up this next year, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I think it takes time to save time, right? And so the longer you do this disorganized thing, the more of essentially like time debt that you're building up that you're going to have to solve one day. And it's so much better to solve it early on than later on. You would not believe some of the CRM setups I've seen from amazing companies, but they just like started doing this too late.
I'm with you. Tell me, workflows.io, that's how people can find you. And you guys do 2 different services. One is like the tool amplification, like sponsors, that kind of stuff. We also do obviously these client work type stuff where you do these workflow setups. So anything else I'm missing? Tell me more what you guys do to make sure people know.
Yeah, in terms of our service, we have 4 main service lines. So it's LinkedIn content. We help founders post the same type of LinkedIn content my co-founder posts. We have automated outbound where we set up these outbound systems end to end. We have RevOps where we're basically helping set up the intricate sort of infrastructure systems that I was presenting. And then we have ABM, which is exactly as you said, 46 months sprint building the system out. So that's about the time frame that I agree with. So yeah, that's basically our 4 main service lines. And everything I showed today is what we're doing day to day, which is why I can speak about it so freely.
Love it. My man, thank you so much. Are you okay if I share your LinkedIn with everyone? That's all right with you?
Of course.
Your LinkedIn?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
I care about LinkedIn a lot.
You care about LinkedIn. Yeah. I appreciate coming on. Like what I'm going to have to do is I might have to either come back on in like, I don't know, 6 months or so when AI is going to change inevitably and just see like what's the latest and greatest, what you guys are doing. I'll have to have you on and see how to do like a repeat for your game.
For sure. I'll probably be like giving the presentation through Cloud Code or whatever. Then it's open.
Good. I love it. Let's do it. I love it. Leon, thank you so much, man. I appreciate you so much.
Cool. Thanks.
Thanks, man. Don't go anywhere.
Thanks for listening to the GTM AI podcast. Please follow, subscribe, like, comment, and come back for more.